Soulful Sauna, Stories of Self-Mastery. Thank you for joining us. It is you, the viewer, that makes this podcast. Your host, Juliette Noske, and her guests are here to share stories of self-mastery, to inspire you and ignite the power of positive change on your own journey. Thank you for being with us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soulful Sauna podcast. And today we have a wonderful guest I'm looking forward to getting to hear from. And his name is Chris Geisler. He's a podcaster, a men's coach, and founder of a men's health organization, Men of the Earth. This is an online platform that supports men to come back into circle and dedicate time to emotional mastery and self-leadership. Chris is dedicated to fostering spaces where people can begin to embrace the full spectrum of their human experience, with a mission to bring truth with compassion and invoke curiosity in all endeavors. Chris delves deep into the mental and emotional, uncovering the patterns and behaviors that shape our lives. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for the intro. I'm going to take that. I'm going to pop that and play it before the things that I do. It's good to have someone reflect and to read it. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm looking forward to being a guest on a podcast. I love the role reverse because obviously I podcast for a living. And yeah, I just am so grateful for you for taking on that role. Like, there's a reason why so many people have podcasts. There's also another reason why most people don't make it past 10, but there's a reason why a lot of people do have podcasts because they're so beneficial, and you know that they're evergreen, like they're there forever, and you just don't know the potential of podcasts. It's just infinite, and I think they've just shaped culture in the world in such a radical way. I really do. So thank you.
Yeah, I had someone the other day, actually. It was my cousin who actually came and mentioned that he'd been listening to my podcast. And it's always nice to know that you are getting out there and that people are listening to them, and they're being inspired by them, and hopefully learning something and opening their minds. And
yeah, I had a message this morning, and they happen now and again at the right time. And today was the right time for me to get that message of it was Samantha Rose, storyteller. She does a lot of online trainings and in person. I don't know if you know her. And she came on this time last year. We had an amazing conversation, and she just got in touch and was just like, "Oh, someone found me. They've done my course, and it was through the podcast." And it's just such a lovely, yeah, because you develop a relationship with you. Like, you'll have a relationship with these listeners, and so will I. And it's developing trust, and for an hour or more of really getting to know someone. Like, you can't really hide from an hour's conversation. You know, you really do get to know people, and you get to a window into their world like no other medium, really.
yeah. How about you let us into your world and tell us if you have any sauna stories?
My favorite thing to do, let people into my world. I do try and reveal my experience everywhere I go. And that's what saunas can do, right? They can reveal this of what's going on in this kind of safe container of feeling externally safe, but also like the intimacy that you can share in a sauna that I've shared. Um, and we're open. Our bodies are not with clothes, and that I think that does something to us as well. The kind of the walls drop and the masks can fade away, and we can just be more authentic and more open and honest. Saunas are either really quiet and they're an internal experience for me, or they're just the complete opposite, and it's just the extremes of going inward or going outward with people. Um, I mean, I'll always be at the end at Medicine Festival this year. I was every night. It was like dedicated to go to the saunas at 2 in the morning and just it was such a hack to feel great for the force where people can go and just 4 days of lots going on at festivals. Like saunas are just taken off, and people just they're their own little sanctuary and their own little space, and have a deep cleanse, like a real deep cleanse. And it did so much for me. I don't know if I could have made the 4 days of minimal sleep without sauna. It's just testament to that practice and to the healing nature of saunas. Going with like 3, 4 hours sleep a night and then going into the sauna and then just having such a rejuvenation. So yeah, a couple would be just dancing and singing in saunas and having such a variety of experience in different saunas because they cater to everyone's needs. I think they have silent saunas, they have kind of middle range, but then they have like full on singing, dancing saunas. Just the spontaneity that comes from saunas is actually really unique. You never get into the same sauna twice. It's always a different experience, and that's probably my biggest thing. I fact you just don't know. Yeah, you just don't know. I'm always at Hackney sauna baths, just loving the community aspect of it. It's just like the cold water scene as well. That's really taken off. It's kind of the sauna, of course, is going to accompany it with so many people leaning into their discomforts and knowing that they are going to benefit from that. So yeah, lots to say about saunas.
Those ones where they're dancing and singing sound quite fun.
I mean, minimal dancing because generally, if there's people singing in the sauna, there's not much room. But it's full power. It's really just people bringing song. I always associated it with, yeah, like I can't sing. Like it's such a common thing. You can or you can't sing. It's very black and white in our culture, and that gets driven in an early age. And I think what's happening in the circles that I'm definitely contributing to and in communion with, it's coming back to circle. It's coming back to singing and dancing and expression. And just the voice is such a powerful way to access who we really are and what blocks we might have. Yeah, with such unique expression happening. It's just such a beautiful way to let go of all the stories we've told ourselves. Singing and voice activation is I've got so much time for, and it's another thing that is accessible in a safe environment, and that can be co-created by just people that just have have less judgment and have more acceptance. And that's what I
Mm.
find in saunas.
I think it's also, like you say, it's creating the space where people are allowed to and allowed to like face their fear or those beliefs that they have from, like you say, childhood. I remember taking part in a workshop. It was a sound workshop, and it was about owning your name and voicing, speaking your truth and voicing your presence. And there were many people that had, story around their name, some positive, some not positive, and the same with, their voice, and actually, making sounds, being loud, or even just, being soft
Yeah.
in the space. But they had loads of different beliefs and things that
Yeah.
they were able to then release in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, and how different that experience might be for men or women or children, and just noticing the variety of discomfort and what sounds appropriate for a man and what sounds not appropriate for a woman, and just moving past that and meeting that energy of, oh, this doesn't feel quite right. I've definitely believe because it's all a story of how we should be. We're all got similar stuff going on, but different access points of the discomfort, and moving through that with the voice is it just can illuminate a lot. You could say dance does that as well. Like I DJ ecstatic dance, and just to move the body, it's like I always ask, like, what ways did you learn to move as a man? Like, what ways did you learn to sing as a man? Like, what was okay? What would get you more attention? And just to meet that edge and just embrace it a little bit more. It's just such low hanging fruit in life. And if we can go to the right spaces that are that are containing that and carefully like allowing it to come up, but then like holding it as well, it can be so powerful. I've seen it, I've witnessed it for people.
Can you remember the first time when you were held in circle?
Yeah, beautiful question. Probably the most memorable one. It was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. Although there have been iterations of just feeling like it was a foreign environment. Like it wasn't for me. Being really cautious of the circle and what it means and what then I am identifying with and having loads of fear come up. But your question was more of when I was held in the circle, because it took a while to feel held because there was so many internal blocks stopping me from allowing me from being held. But the first time I actually felt fully held in a circle was probably at Tony Riddle's 100 Human Experience, where we're in a big container of 100 people. And like just the significance of 100 people coming together and witnessing each other and feeling that there's nowhere to hide in this circle and just looking at the eyes of everyone and noticing that it's not a circle unless you can see everyone's eyes. And just noticing that energy just shift within me of like, there's nowhere to hide here. You can't hide in the corners. It's such a powerful space. But then there's different levels to it because what you get in a big circle, you don't get in an all male circle, which is intimate, which is more revealing because there's less people. And yeah, probably those environments I was moved the most and called in the most. I mean, the hardest thing was actually to be seen by men. And until I started doing that, the work didn't really start to happen. Because that was my biggest. I rejected all those sides of myself. I rejected the masculine within me. Got me into so much trouble. So it was really powerful when I started to put myself into circle with other men and then start to develop more trust and yeah, just witness other men just be open and transparent, honest. And a lot shifted then. And that was like a creation really of me wanting to meet community and meet people. So I started to create it and then men started to come. And it was a very happenstance or it was a very natural progression of like what felt most right for me or what I wanted. I couldn't find it outside of myself, so I started to create it from within and then people just came. Um and it was yeah, it's been a whole journey over the last 3 years of doing that. But it's been yeah, up leveling in so many amazing ways.
What are some of those conversations that you have with the men about things that they need to overcome about facing, within their masculine energy, within their manhood?
I think for me, and yeah, I do notice this a lot, is the measuring self-worth on output, which affects presence and also direction. Like it's hard to be present when you have no direction. Without that kind of North Star that you're moving towards, is I think is very hard to be present. And it's not to say that that's right or wrong. And there's parts of me that spend time without that and get a lot of benefit from just being here now and just stepping into presence in a very different way. But I do think if there's no direction, there's stagnation and it can cause discomfort and anxiety in that process. So presence is a big one. It's like head energy, a lot of head energy, which is very common in our culture of just being very up here, very above. Yeah, I'd also say having the vocabulary, having the understanding of what's going on within, and you'll judge what you don't understand. So we can judge ourselves, we can judge all of the uncomfortable emotions because we don't really understand it, because we don't really have context for it or have healthy examples of what those things are within us. And that can be the biggest thing of not really understanding what it feels like or what shame really means or what guilt feels like or just not having the vocabulary for understanding emotions, how we can move through them as well, obviously. But yeah, I think that's that clarity that's lacking. And then the ability as as the next step to that is to communicate it which is a whole nother level. I can understand what's going on here, but how do I stay with it? And then how am I able to bring that to another without losing it? I think life is generally about being with others without losing yourself and finding that real balance of like honoring what's here, but also honoring another in that process, and how the responsibility is to take responsibility and ownership and lead from that place and not put that onto other people and not project and not feel like anyone else but yourself is the root of those feelings. And I think that's what is happening a lot. We look outside of ourselves for the reasons, the justification of why we feel a certain way. And it's rooted in projection, because it's easier to see outside of ourselves. And if we have a very materialistic way of seeing the world, then we're going to think, oh, of course, it makes sense to what I see, what I hear, what I feel. It's all kind of outside of myself. And then we use that as a reference to why we feel a certain way. And that's just perpetuated in a culture.
I heard one of my spiritual teachers reiterating something that I've heard a lot, which is how actually a lot of our growth can come in relationship to others, because then you're, like you say, you know, we do get to see all of those things. And I guess the choice then is to whether we actually start to realize that they are some form of reflection, like waking us up to where we can, you know, learn and grow from that experience, rather than just seeing it as, you know, something that's coming from the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's my favorite thing to talk about, really is, because, well, is life happening for you or is happening to you? And that's the question. And I don't know ultimately, but I do know which one benefits me the most, and which way I see it, which benefits me the most is happening for me. And whether it's happening to you or for you, which one do you want to choose to believe? I think there's a piece around choosing and the power of choice. And I want to choose to believe that it's all happening for me. And when I lean into that, I can really transmute it. I can act from that place, and it's very empowering to know that I have agency and I have choice around everything, and I can choose to alchemize everything from within. And the um yeah, I mean, Peter Crone is someone that I do listen to quite a lot, and he just talks about this, and it's Eastern wisdom, really. It's Eastern wisdom for Western minds. And he talks about all of the external things, the conflicts that we're in, the job that we don't like. We're all on some level attracting it. We're all on some level wanting it. It's a very unconscious, like how much of our behavior is unconscious, most of it. And there's some attraction to what we're calling in it, and it shows itself and it rears its head mostly in relationships, in those dynamics that we want and need so much from another. But we attract all the things that we did or didn't get as a child, or what our template was in love and in our parents, and what they gave examples for, and how they, yeah, it's just that's the biggest way in, I think, to this work. But it feeds into everything. I'm listening to a book at the moment called well, the one I was listening to actually alongside it was Existential Kink, and it talks about, it's not about kink so much, it's about like the non-duality of life, and how much everything that you have in your life, on some level you want it. And of course, that's easy to think about in terms of, yeah, this is going well, so of course I want that. But how about the things that aren't going so well? Do you want that as well? Is there some unconscious need that you're not seeing? And I think if we can meet most things with that, we're able to look at it from a different angle. We're able to really lean into how we are on some level wanting to feel like, and it's very much ego driven as well. Bruce Lipton talks about how much the ego wants to prove itself right. So if you're not feeling good enough, you're gonna want all the things externally that aren't going to make you feel good. So your ego proves itself right. It proves that, yeah, I told you so. Like, yeah, of course you don't feel good because of this. And I can see why people don't want to see life in that way. And I can see why that that isn't the common way to view things. But I fundamentally think that life is very neutral and we are constantly projecting things onto it to get needs met. It really comes down to that.
I think, yeah, it can, when it's a specifically traumatic experience, you know, um, there are plenty of things out in the world which are like horrific and you wouldn't want anyone to experience them. And,
Mhm.
I have worked with people who have had certain things, whether that's sexual abuse or, other things. Someone lost a child at, 2 hours old. And you might ask yourself, you know,
Yeah,
how can you tell me that I chose that? And be in that like emotion and trauma of it. And I can completely understand where they're coming from. At the same time, if they did choose it on some level, not obviously on a conscious level, if they did choose it on some level, there is a way that they can find peace with it and a different meaning. And Viktor Frankl, in his book
yeah,
Man's Search for Meaning, where he was in Auschwitz, and he found meaning that was beyond his current experience, which was what gave him the strength to then you know survive and actually live a fairly good life when he was released, when they were out. Whereas so many around him died either in there or afterwards from still living in that trauma in their head.
yeah, 100%. It's my favorite books and it changed a lot for me because when you change the way you look at something, the thing you look at changes. And it really is that I see the world in that way. Everything can be an opportunity. And yes, maybe one of the most horrific things that can happen might be sexual assault or rape or like just, you, you know, people just dying very close to you. And it can be so like gut wrenching and so hard to, how is this happening for me? Well, again, I don't know. But the way you choose to see it is going to determine your future. It really is. And the way you choose to meet that opportunity or meet that choice of right. I don't think there's any because I did a talk on this, and of course I'm setting myself up here to have that question, be like, well, this happened to me, and I've got terminal cancer. And I'm like, yeah, I I hear you. Like, what would love do in this situation, or what would fear do? What would leaning into it with curiosity and an ability to see all the gifts within it? Because there are so many. And it really does determine how we live, how we see these things. And it's a mentality thing, it's a response to a situation and very socially constructed. And from an early age, actually, with family, with caretakers, of how you choose to see the world. And this relates to money, it relates to sex, it relates to all the big things in life. And how we choose to see it is really impacting our ability to grow, to be more expansive, to also attract better and more wonderful things and have people around us that are actually filling us up rather than draining us. Because we're all always in kind of commune with other people. And just take a look around you. Like, who do you have in your life? And observe the language and the behavior. And maybe it's a hard reflection to do, but like maybe that is reflecting on who you have chosen to be. And yeah, just to stick on the point though, um, I do believe that Viktor Frankl made it through that traumatic experience because, and he did accounts of all the people that that kept going because they believed that they would be set free one day, and it was the single most thing that stopped them from, just giving in and dying. And we know that. We know that old people that make it through their 90s because they're so strong and strong-willed, and it's their mentality. Like it can be the biggest thing. Because stress and anxiety, depression, we know how interlinked they are with the body. And yes, diet's important, lifestyle's important, all the external things that we know we need. Water's important. Doing all your practices. But I do believe that your mentality does, and it can happen the other way around. I love the phrase that it's easy to act your way into a new way of thinking rather than think your way into a new way of acting. So it can work both ways. You can really like start to act and to do more things in your life that are going to fill you up, and it can change your mindset from that way. I'm not going to just sit in a room and like think my way out of all the problems in my life. Like it's a conversation around being in the world, but not of it, and just changing that perception. Because perception's the biggest word in the English language. It just is. It's the way we perceive things and how that impacts our biology, because it really does. The mind body loop, I guess it's also referred to.
It reminds me of the conversation that we were having a little bit earlier about water as well. And you were mentioning how, obviously the saliva in our mouths is water. We're made of 70-80% water. And then when we speak words, that vibration is going into the saliva and the water in our bodies and
Mhm.
vibrating through our bodies. And yeah, that impact that it has, whether those are thoughts or whether those are actual words, they're still, you know.
Yeah, and their vibrations more than anything, because words are interpretive and different language, but think about the energy and the vibration behind your words. That really shapes how it interacts with the world. So when we speak things, there's a book, and it's on the tip of my tongue. Miguel Ruiz,
Oh yes, the four
you know it.
agreements.
Yes, the Four Agreements. And one of them is be impeccable with your word. Like be impeccable with your word. It's everything you say. Like, are you speaking into the future, your own demise, or are you affirming the things that you want? And it's so beautiful. I've been tapping into this stuff with money and saying like, I can't afford that. It's so definitive. It's so just finite almost. And I'm actually speaking in to the world, the things that I'll never have. So I'm changing all these ways and these access points of learning more about my own beliefs. And just yeah, for now, that's not a priority. And just
Mm.
that in itself just changes the energy of it. Like words are spells, they're spellings, and they're abracadabra with my words I create. It's another way into this stuff. So we can look at language and how we're actually, yeah, like showing up. There's a great phrase that I've started to use. My friend Jeff Lester brought it in, and it's I've got to do that. I've got to do that. I've got to go to the shops. I've got to go here. Changing it to I get to. And it's so profound. Just
Mm,
I get to go to the shops. Yeah, you get to. Yeah, you get to. Like there's so many people in the world that don't get to do that. You do.
mm.
And it just changes the whole energy. It's less kind of, yeah, depressive. It's more expressive. It's yeah. I do want to share Veda Austin's story. So I went to see Veda Austin last night, who talks about the science of water. So her story speaks to this. She opened up with, I was in a car crash early on. It was way into her health journey and the way she started studying water. She got into a car crash and the driver died instantly. She rolled 3 times. It was an absolute car wreck, under an 18-ton lorry. She survived. She had shards of glass all down this side of her arm, and the windscreen glass, because one was green because in the car there were bottles of beer, and then this side was the windscreen. Anyway, she went to a doctor and some alternative health, and they gave her this water which was like high vibration water, very pure. And she started to drink it. She drink it for weeks, and it started to purge this glass out of her body, like it was coming out of her. And she was so fascinated at how this water had allowed that to happen. So she opens with that, and that's her way into studying water. And just for context, she freezes. She freezes petri dishes of water. She speaks into them good intentions, bad intentions, negative, positive words. And she does incredible amount of study on this. And she's written a book. It's phenomenal. But later on in the talk, she talks about that driver. I want to give you a vulnerable story. That driver actually was in love with me. He followed me around. I told him to stop. And then he offered me a lift home one day when it got too much. And she was like, okay, I've been friends with this guy for a long time. And then he took her to this hill. We didn't take her to the direction she was wanting, took her to this hill and was like, you need to be with me. And it was very obsessive, very compulsive. And he was mentally not well. And she was like, what am I going to do here? She was like, I need to get out of here. So maybe I'll just, in those situations which are vulnerable and like threatening, I need to kind of be really careful of what I do here because it could go badly. Anyway, she agreed to get in the car with him to drop her off. And he in this car down the motorway said, if I'm not going to have you, no one will. And he drove straight into the lorry. And you can imagine, after hearing all of her story and how it's panned out, imagine being with that. Imagine surviving that. This guy who was a good friend of hers for a long time, had kids. And she told us the story about going to his funeral and forgiving him and what that allowed for her kids to access in that moment, because the kids were obviously devastated. But what Veda did, which was so powerful, and what we speak to, is that she decided to go to this funeral and decided to say the good things about this man, not deny or lie or try and deceive, but she was like, this man was intelligent, and he was a good friend of mine for a long time. And I was pleased to know him. And it was just profound because she chose to lean into that with love. She chose to lean into that with openness and just forgiveness, whilst being in this very traumatic situation, nearly dying in a wheelchair. Like, her life was just, didn't know whether she was going to be able to live a long, healthy life. She could have lived a life with resentment and hate in her heart, and she didn't. And it's just her perspective and how she showed up in that environment that really shaped it, and shaped it for probably gave that man's kids a chance as well.
Is an example, I guess, of what you were just speaking about, where someone is able to see a terrible situation, something that many won't experience, that, who can imagine what it was like to be in that experience, but then for her to be able to find forgiveness. And I know that a lot of people find forgiveness really challenging.
Yeah. The biggest one was that she forgave herself, and that allowed her to forgive others. I think that's the biggest one. It's like when you don't forgive someone, it's like you're loading a gun, or what's the quote? You're loading a gun, one for you, one for them. Forgiveness is letting go of a hope for a better past. And it's such a big, I'm sure there's someone in all of our lives we can forgive in this moment. I'm sure there's something that we're holding on to that we could just stop and just allow just more compassion. There's a great quote that I keep sharing lately. It goes, who understand what's not me? Because if I did, I would forgive. Because do we understand? Do we understand what's going on for people? Yes, some things seem hard to forgive. It's something that can hold us back. And if we have context for the human experience, and that's what's missing a lot of the time, and that's what I speak to around revealing my experience. If I give people more context and speak from this place rather than you, then that's going to give people way more context for for
Mm.
for what I said, how I showed up, what actions I did that didn't feel quite right, or were, yeah, not in not in harmony.
Yeah. When we show up fully as well in circle, it gives other permission, obviously, that that permission to show up for themselves. And people are often quite surprised that actually other people are going through similar things. And it's really beautiful to know that you're not alone, and that everyone is going through their own things. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is kicking out the pedestal, because whether it's ourselves or someone else that we're putting on a pedestal, we're, imagining that that person has, they're really organized, or they have the perfect relationship, or, they have, everything that they could desire in life. And when we put them on that pedestal, we make what they have, number one, we make it unobtainable for us. And we also set them up to fail, because they're only human. So eventually they're going to mess up in some way, and yeah, for me, it really is getting rid of that pedestal and realizing that we're all equal. We're not the same by all means, but we're all equal, and we're all on this journey. And my failures and mistakes might look different to you, but they're still failures and mistakes. And then I have the opportunity to learn and grow from them. And when I fall down, then someone else will help pick me up. And then the same goes, I help others and pick them up and remind them and inspire them with things like this podcast to keep going, even though, they fell over.
Yeah, it's so true and well said. It really is that. I mean, yeah, I'm meeting more people than ever that do have an opinion of me, and it's through the online world. And I've got to say, people, that's not real. What we see online isn't real. And I think it's important to keep speaking to. It's like I did a story the other day. I'm like, what goes on here is just not, it's not the whole piece. And you need to know that it's very hard to, it's very hard to show up online with everything, with the fullness, because I'm not inspired to share things when I'm feeling low and I'm feeling like the world's against me. And you also got to understand that most people preach or speak to the big topics that help inspire you because they need them the most, because they've alchemized and they've moved through things. But it doesn't say it stops and it stops showing up. You just get more, you just get better at moving through it. And you have tools and you have practices, and that window of going into the depths of not feeling well and not feeling vibrant, that window just gets shorter, you know?
Yeah, I spoke to someone, a friend last night actually, and she mentioned, we were talking about relationships, and she spoke about a friend who had written a book, and she'd been through all kinds of dating experiences, and she, she'd done some coaching in the area, like received some coaching on an amazing coaching program, and she'd written this super book, and the culmination of which was her marriage to someone. The week before the book was going to be launched, he left her, and you might think, oh, who's she to be, writing a book about relationships? But for me,
Yeah.
Even if, I mean, I did relationship coaching, many years ago, doesn't mean that, I had the perfect relationship, because what is the perfect relationship? It's certainly not a long one, because we know that there are people that suffer in long relationships. It's certainly not all of those things that we have in our mind. And I don't think there is this perfect relationship, because we're not perfect, we're imperfect. And, maybe that was a place where I needed the more help. But I think even if, even like you say, when you work in an area, it's because you're passionate about that, and you've learned things that you want to then share with others, so that they can have that learning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, relationships are the biggest teachers. That's it.
Mm.
But are we
Yeah.
doing them well? Like I, lo- I just thrive talking and learning about relationships, how we show up in them, how authentic we can be, how much we can reveal our experience, honor it, but also validate and really meet in others. And in that dance, can you have more connection than disconnection? And yeah, I'm still learning. It's never easy. Great podcast recently was Andrew Huberman and Esther Perel. Yeah, really good, really. Esther Perel's just an absolute G. And yeah, it's just go. Don't listen to me. Go listen to that podcast because there's a lot of great material out there, right? And a lot of amazing books, and start to look at attachment styles and start to look at a great guy called Jason Gladys who has an amazing book, how to navigate conflict in high stakes relationships, getting to zero. I think that's a beautiful book. There are just so many things, but you have to really want to go there and want to learn and not project that onto your partner, and it has to be for you. And knowing your needs. And there was, what, 4 years ago I didn't have any needs. They were just not a thing. I didn't associate with them. I didn't think that was me. And there's a lot of settling going on. There's a lot of settling. We settle for behavior, but that's the standard we accept and we want more of. You're going to get more of it if you accept it. So it comes from here, it comes from here. You can't, when it's ever telling or directing or provoking someone to do anything worked, it's rare that it does, and it creates further disconnection. There's definite tools, and there's things that work. There are just things that work in relationship. We're not perfect. We will always get it wrong, but how quickly can you come back into connection? That is a testament to any relationship. I don't think there's a relationship that wouldn't work if two people aren't willing to do the work to grow, to lean into, this is actually where we meet each other, where we meet each other's unhealthy tendencies, darkness, and can we go there to know there, and then come away from the relationship at times, and then really like hone in on the stuff that is going to make us show up more and better. And I think we just want that. We all want that. We want a person to meet us in that place and just, yeah, just keep growing with us, because we're going to grow no matter what. There's no staying in the middle.
Yeah. One of the good things to ask yourself when you're in a conflict in a relationship is, do you want to be right or do you want to be love?
I've always struggled with that one. Yeah.
Because we want to be right, right? Because, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it happened last night. I was chatting to someone and I was like, so do you know what's going on here? We're just validating. We're just wanting validation for both of our extremes of this example. We were talking about a topic, and I was at one end, she was at another, and I was like, we just want to be validated in this. Can you validate me in this? I think we would agree on the majority, but like if we go to the extremes of this conversation, you're over here, I'm over here. Probably everything in the middle we agree with, but just this one bit. And we're really trying to make like that be seen. And I was just like, it's just hilarious because I'm sure there's so much we'd agree on, but we really want this one piece to be seen. And maybe we can't see that, and that's okay too. We're not going to agree on everything. And I think when you allow that in, yes, we're not going to agree. Can we just come into connection anyway?
Mm. Can you remember when your self-mastery journey began? Were there any like pivotal moments?
Yeah, there was traveling and opening my heart up, having deep experiences, having like some serendipitous moments when I was very present, when I was getting a lot of my needs met as a human. Like when you travel and backpack, I think you have the most deep experiences with the world and with people. And that was happening. And then I started listening to podcasts, and they were just windows into other people's worlds without agendas. And I was learning so much. And it started to rewire my brain. Like it did. It started to rewire the patterns that or go-tos or survival strategies or mechanisms to keep me safe. And then I would start to lean into perspective and understanding, okay, this makes sense. This actually, like, I'm no different to you, you're no different to me. I'm seeing the world as an extension of me, and just learning ideas about what the world is and where we came from as humans. Like, nothing makes sense unless it's in the eyes of evolution. I think um, Theodore Dostoevsky said that. No, I think it was an American president, but it's a great way to just lean into life. Like, what makes sense for you as a human? And then when I started to lean into that, that is a part of the mastery. It's a part of being in alignment as a human, and leaning into what's natural for me and where my biology spent most of its time and what is natural for it. And that's what biohacking is really. It's the modern day meets your biology and what's actually beneficial for it. So then we can actually bring these two with, yeah, quite powerful and, yeah, like important hacks like breath work, like sauna, like cold, like meditation, like, yeah, some of the superfoods that we have access to now. It's like, how do we, yeah, how do I align myself with all these things to then live well and just to have my body in a better state to then start to do the other work as well, do the energy work, do the manifestation work, do the mental work as well. So physicality, and you can break it all down into physical, social, spiritual, mental, emotional needs, but it's really aligning all these things, and I think that is a part of the mastery. I also believe that the mentality and things we've talked about is probably the thing people draw on the most when it comes to mastery. Because if you master your mind, if you master your emotions, and know that that's communicating to you, but that's not going to rule the day. Like your emotions, you, I don't think you can let them rule your actions. And I think it's having responses to those things and having more like of a hold on them and an understanding with love and compassion, which is another piece. But like, yeah, bringing that mentality in. But if you're ignoring the body, if you're ignoring the food you eat, then you're going to be a human in suffering to some extent. So it's like a full spectrum thing for me. And it was just a journey of curiosity of listening to podcasts and just making decisions of okay, I need to prioritize my health because at some point in my life, it's going to be the thing that's most important. And that's the same for everyone. And I didn't see that in any other capacity. I was like, hell, oh yeah, we actually separate this from everything we do at times. And we don't really look at it and we don't focus on it and can just be like, oh yeah, like when something goes wrong, we'll just look at it. And it's like such a symptom of our times because that is the quick fix model. It's the medical philosophy that we exist in. And really, my whole life is catered around my health, and I prioritize that for a long time. And now I've feeling like I've mastered a big piece of that. Now I'm in a good state to call in different things like business and offerings and service and collaborations and doing more of that stuff because now it's just a natural thing for me to wake up in the morning to sit in meditation to really just be in the world in a healthier way because when I'm in discomfort daily, I'm not a nice person.
Mm.
And that can come from my body. It can come from my posture. It can come from so many different things. But going on a journey with that, like it's now time for something bigger, let's say. But I think it's an integral part of the mastery piece.
When I work with clients, one of the things that I find really fascinating and like beneficial to do is to look at where I was before I did any of this work. And sometimes I'm quite like, you know, amazed at where I was and how kind of asleep I was in many ways, how unaware of all of these things. But it also is great because then it gets me to see through the eyes of maybe the clients that I'm working with who haven't learned all of those amazing different perspectives and tools that I've, had the benefit of experiencing. Um, so yeah, how about you? Can you remember or, have you like reflected back on what are some of those things or ways of being that you realize you were stuck in?
Yeah, loneliness was a big thing. I didn't have people around me that I could trust or felt safe with, that I could be myself. And that is as within, so without. That was true externally. but it was also true internally. I didn't really know myself. I didn't really know what my gifts were when in community, when with men, women, and that would just perpetuate the cycle, really. So until I really started to learn what was important to me, embody that, and then start to bring that into the world, because I was constantly looking for like just to take. I was give. It was like there was not much giving, and there was a lot of like, I want to receive, I want to take, and why haven't I got these things? And then I started to have more of a dialogue around that with giving and taking and what I can give, and that changed a lot. So there was a significant period of time where I just didn't feel like I had any friends. Like that was real. I, I mean, I did, and they were what felt quite surface. Um, and maybe that's a norm. I mean, there's statistics on how many men can call their close friends, and it's a big majority that only have one or two. So it's a very normal thing. But the reaction I had to that internally was it didn't need to be this way, and I need to have a team around me. I need to have friends that like I can go there with, and yeah, who can really hold me through some stuff because I can't do it alone. So that started to make sense. Yeah, a good decade ago, and I was on that journey for a while. There was a time where I just had this visceral feeling, if I look back, of being in a job, being very busy and feeling calm. My nervous system was calm. That doesn't mean it's a good thing because I can be feeling safe when I'm so busy, but when I'm not and I'm on my own, and I've got a weekend free, I'm in absolute anxiety and I'm like so confused in my head a lot. It opened up such a window of like, just I used to just freak out, come into depression. Um, and it was a healthy reaction to circumstances that just didn't serve me. It really was, and I've always seen like the depressed feeling as a reaction. It's a sense. It's a signal that I have to either choose to respond to or not, or suppress. And there was just it's just really real that I went through that, and I can own that now. I work for an events company. It was also related to my purpose, and like I felt really purposeful, and like I was doing something of value when I was doing and being in that environment. Not that I connected with it so much, but then when I would, yeah, it would just really rear its head when I just was alone, and all these thoughts, feelings would come up, and really it's just revealing to me what's actually there, but a distraction when I'm not there is helping alleviate all those emotions and feelings. So it was really having to look at purpose and what I can create. But it was a big journey, you know. It took so many years
Mm.
to really start to, yeah, just answer the call, because that is also a call, and whether you choose to answer it or not, it's up to you. I think there's always that feeling, that voice. Maybe it's a conversation with God. Um, maybe it's something else, your intuition. But there are voices, and it's whether we train to not speak to them and then they're going to get quieter, or do we start to like let them in and start to pay them attention without judging them so much. So
Mm.
yeah, that those two things were definite, the beginnings of the curiosity, and I think that's happening to most people. But it's, yeah, it's easy to reach for things these days. It's easy
Yeah.
to reach for things.
You have a 21-day cold water challenge in November.
Yeah, so it's the fifth year I've done it. It's such a beautiful experience for a community that we come together around the midpoint and the end to discuss the experience, to navigate it together. There's not much interaction throughout. It's a very solo journey, but there's definitely a community accountability throughout. So anyone can access this at any level. It's from the shower to the stream to the river to the lake, wherever you are, wherever you can get into cold water, and it's pretty much accessible for everyone. So that's it. And you can start slow and you can build up. Uh, 3 minutes is really the aim, no more or less. But you can build up to that, and it's just an amazing way to feel calm in the discomfort. There's so many benefits from psychological to physiological, and every day we traverse a benefit, and we also add an additional task. It might be a meditation, might be a breath work. So people come in thinking it's just about the cold, and maybe people leave with that. But there's also so many other things that I feed into this group, which allows more of an invitation because it's not the primary task. Primary task is the cold, but there's so many of the other things that I feed in, like poetry and yeah, different practices, like really like meeting yourself. And it's about inner work. It's about education about the cold and how it's one of the most powerful practices I know because you can never get good at it. It's not something that you overcome maybe in the moment, but your body always thanks you for getting in, but it doesn't always thank you for not getting in. So I never regret not getting into the cold. But there's always this conversation around should I, shan't I? And over the 5 years I've been doing it, that has shortened and doesn't even exist much anymore. So it's just knowing that it's a great access point to yeah. There's just everyone's heard of it now. I think it's been popularized over the last few years, and yeah, it's also changed the way I travel. Everywhere I travel, I look for cold water to have that experience, and it can be like a real physical practice. It can be emotional override. It can be spiritual experience. Like it can just be all of the above and whatever you want to make it. Just taking that time for yourself, 3 minutes to yourself, just to go there and just to be and just to rely on it because it's always cold.
Yeah, I love that, especially after a sauna.
It's the easiest time after a sauna.
Oh, of course, it is the easiest time. Yeah, yeah. But I remember hearing a lady speaking, an expert in the area of cold therapy, and she was saying, even for people who, for whatever reason can't go into the cold water, she said, if you go out with like, just a t-shirt on when it's colder weather, or you sleep with your window open rather than having the heating on all night, when you're
Yeah.
sleeping, and you expose yourself to a bit more cold and a bit more cold. She said I can't remember the name of it, but down the back is the brown fat, mainly around the spinal column to protect the nervous system.
Brown adipose tissue, I think it's your spinal column and that's your central nervous system. I mean everyone knows the neck. It's always about getting the shoulders and the neck in. But yeah.
Yeah. That deteriorates as you get older. And that's why, it's really good to keep up that exposure. And if you, not that you would, if you put a tiny baby out on table in the winter and it was snowing, it wouldn't be able to shiver under a certain age, under, however many months old. And so the brown fat kind of protects it as well. So it's a huge supportive thing for us. And keep exposing ourselves to cold means that we can keep that developing and supporting our body and our health. But I love how you say it's not just about the water, because it's not really, is it? It's about what that brings up in you, and dealing with that, whatever that is. And obviously that journey is going to be personal for each person.
Yeah, it changed people's lives. It's really that powerful. And just the acknowledgement that we need to develop some sense of discomfort in our lives because we go from room to car to inside. We live a lot of our lives in comfort and it's great, but it's also important to acknowledge that that is going to weaken us. And it's about developing the window of tolerance that we can start to stretch that to overcome it. And it just makes sense. You can't disagree with developing a sense of discomfort in your life and how that's going to manifest. So yeah, it's something everyone should lean into at least once. So the course is going to be there for 21 days, 3 weeks. yeah, bring more people into the practice.
So is there a piece of advice that you have for others out there on their self-mastery journey to leave them with?
Yeah, piece of advice. Go for a walk every morning for 20 minutes. First thing you do. Get up, get out, and sit on the floor a lot. I honestly think the more you sit on the floor and just don't expect things to happen so quickly, but after a few years of making the floor a place where you come and make it nice, get some cushions, but like the floor is also the outer experience of what the shoe might be for the foot. So the floor will be like your feet on the earth, let's say. And there's some contrast between the two of like getting your feet off as much as possible, getting your shoes off as much as possible, but also sitting on the floor as much as possible. Because when this the floor is hard, I just think it's the one thing that can change so much from a physical point of view. And I just speak about it wherever I go. It's you need to just sit on the floor more because we just don't. And the one thing that allows people to go into care homes is the ability to get off the toilet. And we see it everywhere. It's actually confirmed by society as we move into our older age that men and women like start to just lose that mobility. It's what happens when people go into hospital. They actually often come out worse than they go in because they're just sat in bed a lot. And I just get into this as much as possible from this age, wherever you're at, just to start to develop a relationship from getting from the ground to standing, because that was a prerequisite to walk, to crawl. And if we're not doing those things, I don't think we should be doing much else because we're going to be getting injured, and yeah, it's gonna end in kind of that posture being compromised. And the ground needs to be hard because when the ground's hard, you soften. But when the ground or wherever you're sitting, the chair, the couch, is soft, you will harden, and that's where you stiffen. So you'll figure out you won't be able to sit in the same position for longer than a couple of minutes. So your body wants to move. Your body will tell you when to move. So yeah, above everything that I do, I honestly think that is the biggest advice that I'd ever give to people.
Well, it's been really lovely talking to you, Chris. And yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. It's been beautiful to chat to you and go in different directions and have a beautiful, authentic convo. It's my favorite.
Thank you. Mm. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Soulful Sauna podcast. We appreciate your continued support. Feel free to leave us a rating, share with your family, friends, and loved ones. I have a question to leave you with. What inspired you from today's podcast, and what actions are you going to take as a result? Time to tell your own story of self-mastery.